God, excited about this morning. I want to start this morning by talking about what I believe to be the most important thing about us, about your life and about my life. Three things that happen to us in life that if we come to terms with these three things, it has the potential to change everything. And some of you are like, Brad, I've heard you say this before. And I'm like, I know. I come back to this 3 or 4 times a year because it is at the beginning of surrender, the biggest thing about us. And really about you and about my life. So here it is, 3 things that happen to us in life. The first is that God revealed himself to us. This might be the biggest mystery of all, that God chooses to come to you and to come to me and say, I want you to see things that without me you would never see. And I want you to hear things that without me, revealing myself to you, you would never hear. And I want you to discover things about me and about this life that without me coming and revealing myself to you, you would never discover. We would never experience life to the full, the life that our God wants for us. And that's the first part that makes up the biggest thing about us, that God revealed himself to us. And the second thing is that Jesus Christ died on the cross for the sins of the entire world, because it was the only way to cover the gap between God and us. Jesus, the creator of the universe, died for our sins. Because he's holy and we're not holy, because we're selfish, and Jesus said, I will be the mediator. And one time for all time, Jesus gave his life for the sins of the entire world. And so now for the third part, that in light of those first 2 things, in light of the fact that God created us and revealed himself to us, because he wants to be known by you and appreciated by you and loved by you and worshiped by you, discovered by you, that we would believe in the gift of Christ through the cross and surrender our lives back to God. That's it. That God revealed himself to us, that Jesus gave his life on the cross, and then in response, we would offer our lives back to him in surrender. It's the absolute most important thing about your life, about my life. So what is surrender? What does that mean? To offer our lives back to him. Go ahead and open up your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 3. We're going to learn today a little bit about surrender from an Old Testament story. And at the end of today, I want to give you a prayer that I believe is the beginning of surrender. And it's a prayer we're going to get right from the story of Samuel this morning. We're going to get it from his own mouth. In chapter 3, we find the story of this kid, and he's a child named Samuel. But before we read chapter 3, the beginning of chapter 3, there's a few things that you need to understand about what's happened before this moment. The first is about Samuel's mother, Hannah. Hannah was a woman who could not have children. It says that God had closed her womb. It's kind of a mystery. She could not have children, and she had tried and tried, but wasn't able to. And then something happened one day because Hannah decided she was going to pray this prayer. And you can read all about her prayer in 1 Samuel chapter 1. But she prays this prayer. And here's the short version of the prayer. God, if you will bless me with a child, I will dedicate him to the Lord, to you, for all the days of his life. That's the prayer. So as we read on, God blesses Hannah with a son, and she named him Samuel, saying, because I asked the Lord for him. So there's this woman, Hannah, who can't have kids. She prays. The Lord blesses her with a son. And so then the time comes for her to fulfill her promise to the Lord, the promise that she made. Lord, if you bless me with a son, I'll dedicate him to you for all the days of his life. She made that promise, and the time comes for her to fulfill that promise. And so we read in the first couple chapters of 1 Samuel that when the time of nursing was over, and we don't know exactly how long that was at that time, but Samuel was not an infant. Most scholars would think he was around the age of 5, maybe a little older. Some scholars think he was as old as 10 years old. We don't really know. But sometime later, Hannah, she takes Samuel, her son, that had been blessed to her by God, to the temple of the Lord, and she's there to dedicate Samuel. Now, maybe you've been a part of one of our services here at One Line. We call them child dedication services. We do them a couple times a year, and what happens is families come up on our stage, and they bring their children or their child, and we pray over them. And the families are coming before the church to say, hey, church, and hey, God, we are committing to raise our kids to know Jesus. And they make a confession, and then we respond in encouragement. And it's our child dedication ceremony. And this is essentially like that. That's essentially kind of what's happening. Hannah takes her son, Samuel, presents him to Eli the priest at the temple of the Lord. And she tells Eli all the stuff about how she had prayed. She didn't have a child, and that she had prayed, and that, God, if you bless me with a child, then I'll dedicate him. And so she tells Eli all of that. And then this is what she says, 1 Samuel 1, verse 28. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life, he will be given over to the Lord. And she's doing this at the temple with Eli the priest. Now, if you're anything like me, and not all of you, this was your experience, but for me, it was my experience. When I was growing up, and my brother and my sister, we did not have a choice of whether or not we were going to church. You woke up on Sunday morning, and it got to the point where you really stopped asking because you knew that's what we were doing. Not just once, but even on Sunday night. We went to church then too, and we'd be out in the neighborhood playing hide and seek with our friends, and this was before the cell phones, and so our parents would go out on the porch and they would scream, hey kid, and we knew it's time to go to church, and our friends would be mad. They're like, you're ruining our hide and seek game. I know, but we got to go to church. That was the way it was. We were in wrestling. We had to wrestle in Iowa because those tournaments were on Saturday. We got to choose 3 Illinois tournaments a year because those were on Sunday. That's how it was for our family. And really, to be honest, that was a game changer for me. It marked me for sure that my parents made that a priority for us. They took us to church. Well, that's basically what happened here with Samuel. His mom, Hannah, takes him to church, but then here's the part that's different. She takes him to church, and then she kind of like starts backing away. She's like, see you later, Samuel. Bye. Have a nice life, Samuel. And she leaves. She leaves him at the temple with Eli. She dropped her kid off at church and left. Samuel, he's standing there with this guy Eli that he doesn't know. That's where he's supposed to live all the days of his life. And so Samuel, he essentially has this continual overnighter at the church. Maybe he called it a lock-in like we like to do one time a year when we have brave enough volunteers. Maybe we should start a ministry like that where you can just drop your kids off and then say goodbye. Some of you are like, I would take you up on that. I've got a couple, maybe one of my kids, maybe all your kids, you're going to drop them off and leave. Luke and Kathy, they might want a little bit of a raise. We'd figure it out. But that's what happened. He's having a continual overnighter at church. And that's all backstory. Now we're going to read together chapter 3, starting in verse 2. One night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But he's like, I didn't call you. Samuel, go back and lie down. And I'm sure Eli's a little bit cranky. He's obviously tired. He's been woken up in the middle of the night because Samuel just ran in. And he's like, this lady dropped her kid off here for me. He's waking me up in the middle of the night. What are you talking about? I didn't call you. Go back and lie down. So Samuel goes back and lies down. Again, the Lord called, "Samuel." Samuel got up, went to Eli, and said, "Here I am. You called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." I'm sure he's a little bit more stern in this moment. Like, what is happening? Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time, the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me." And finally, Eli, the spiritual leader that he is, he gets a clue. It says, then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down. And if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." I love that. So Samuel went, lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Samuel came to a place in that very moment where he realized, this is about me and God. This is no longer about this place that my mom dropped me off. This is no longer about this place that I'm supposed to go to. He's saying to God, "God, what do you need from me?" Just like the words of that song. Who you love, I'll love. Where you go, I'll go. Where you send. He's realizing this is about me and the one who created me. Here I am. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. What an amazing way to answer the call of God. And my hope is that that would become your prayer and my prayer starting this summer, if it isn't already. That in surrender, you would say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." Because there needs to come a time in our lives when we declare that. The binge-worthy life that we're talking about, the life that God gets a hold of and begins to do the extraordinary, it happens because of that kind of surrender. "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." I'm here, I'm available, I'm listening, I'm surrendered to you. Because here's the deal. Your life is surrendered to something. It's surrendered to something. Because all day long, in some area of your life, you are declaring what means most to you. Something to be of greatest value. And you may not use that word. You may not use the word surrender in relation to whatever that thing is, but you're surrendered to it. And you're going to spend the rest of your life declaring its worth. What is that thing for you? All of us do it. We all find a way to be surrendered to something. If you remember the story of Aaron and the Israelites, when Moses is up on the mountain, he's getting the 10 Commandments, and they get tired of waiting for Moses. What do? Some of you remember, some of you don't, this is the first time you're going to hear this, but they're tired of waiting on Moses. They begin to doubt. And so they collect all the gold jewelry, and they throw it in the fire, and they shape it into a calf. And they begin to worship this golden calf while Moses is on the mountain getting the commandments from God. It's a fascinating story, and I'm like, what does it even look like to worship a calf? Like, you just kind of stare at it, stare back at you? I mean, I don't know what they expect to happen. But the point is, we will find something to surrender to. We will find something to worship because it's how we were wired. There was a longing that was wired within us from our God to worship, to be surrendered. And you're surrendered to something. There's another moment in the book of Acts when Paul, he's at this place of worship, and he's a key leader in the early church, and people are there. They're worshiping all sorts of gods. And then Paul looks around, and he sees this one that has this inscription on it. It says this, "Altar to an unknown God." It's like, wow, if we've missed anything, let's just make sure we cover all of our bases here. Altar to an unknown God. And Paul, he gets all the people together and says, "Hey, let me tell you about this unknown God. In fact, he's the only true God. He's the only God you can be surrendered to and find real life." And think about this with me. If you just kind of look around culture, look around the world, outside of our country, all over the place, there has never been a shortage of surrender. There's never been a shortage of worship. It's everywhere. You can look throughout history, and there are trillions of little idols. If there's something that we can place on a throne, we will. It's our natural bent. It's how we're wired. There's never been a shortage of it. You can study all of the ancient civilizations. Look at the temples. Look at the idols. Surrender is everywhere. We can't help but worship something. It's how we were made. And it's true for you, and it's true for me. Your life is surrendered to something. What is the direction of your life? What are you surrendered to? If you don't know it, I bet your closest friends can tell you. I bet we could take a quick glance at your bank statement for the last 3 months and probably be able to tell you where you're spending your money, the most time, the most energy, what keeps you awake at night, what consumes your thoughts. Again, you might not use the word surrender, but you're surrendered to something. And I can't help but wonder, as I read this story, this is kind of what came to me this week, how many times God has called out to us like he did Samuel, Brad, or insert your name, where he's revealing himself to us, where he's trying to get our attention, but we're too busy being surrendered to something else. And maybe unlike Samuel, well, Samuel gets up, and even though he's confused at first, he goes to Eli, here I am, you called me. But then when he finally figures it out, he says, here I am, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. I wonder how many times our response is something different. Well, not yet, Lord. Let me get this figured out first, Lord. Well, that sounds a little bit too hard, Jesus. Is your surrender to something else keeping you from hearing or saying yes to the voice of God in your life? What do you surrender to? Maybe you're surrendered to your doubt. Maybe it's a doubt, a self-doubt, or maybe it's a doubt about God. Maybe there's things that you don't feel like you have quite figured out, and so you're hesitant to trust him. Maybe you're surrendered to your fear. Well, if I say yes to God, he is going to pull me away from this well laid out plan that I've got for my life. And I've got a good plan. I don't know, what are you surrendered to? Maybe it's a sin. Maybe you've got a sin in your life that's become a stronghold in your life. And you know that if you get close to God, he's going to ask you to stop that, and you're not sure you're ready to stop that. Maybe it's your career. Maybe that's what you're surrendered to. Maybe that's got the trajectory of your life. And all of your greatest strategy and all of your greatest goal setting, it's left in the office for whatever your career is. But when it comes to your surrender to God, maybe it's not there. Maybe it's the American dream. When it comes to God's call in your life to give your life to building his kingdom, to leverage all that you have, to make an impact that will last forever, not just something that will spoil and fade away. And maybe you're surrendered to something like that that's temporary, when you could be surrendered to building the kingdom of Jesus. A binge-worthy life is a spirit-led life. And we've had 8 of these, and that's this week. A binge-worthy life is a spirit-led life. It's a life that positions itself to hear the voice of God, to listen to the voice of God, and then respond with a yes in obedience. That's a spirit-led life. And I get in conversations all the time with people that are just like, I just want to be in a deep relationship with Jesus. And that word depth is super tricky. Because really depth is measured by how short that gap is between God saying go and you going. That's depth. That's surrender. That when you hear the voice of God or you read a command of God, and all the stuff that we've talked about over the last 8 weeks that make up a binge-worthy life is pretty radical. If you actually look at what Jesus said to do and then you do it, it's really radical. And spiritual growth could be measured by your ability to close that gap. That when Jesus gives a command, when Jesus says to do something, that you actually do it. And then trust that he's right when he says, I've come that you might have the fullest life possible. A binge-worthy life is a spirit-led life. If you want to see God take what's ordinary and do the extraordinary, then you have to learn what it means to surrender, to hear his voice, and to respond with a yes. Because the beginning of surrender is a prayer, and it's the prayer that we get from Samuel. It's the words of Samuel. It's the beginning of surrender. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And so I want to wrap up today, and what has been an incredible 8 weeks. I know for me, as I've been studying, as we've been looking into the words of Scripture, and actually the words of Jesus, and saying, all right, Jesus, what have you said? Because I want to do that in my life. I want to wrap all of this up with a time of surrender, just by yourself, to yourself, at your seat. And if you were here the first couple weeks of this series, we gave everybody a piece of salt. And episode 1 of Bingeworthy was Pass the Salt. And we looked at those words of Jesus when he said, you're the salt of the earth. And for us, we're like, salt, no big deal. It's salt. I like it on my food. But when Jesus said, you are the salt of the earth, it meant something for them. Those original hearers. It was transformational for them. Because then when they hear Jesus say, you're the salt of the earth, what they hear is, wow, if I'm surrendered to you, Jesus, then what that means is that my life is going to add value. Because that's what salt does. To everybody that I come in contact with, it's going to add value. It means that my life is going to bring out flavor in the world, that I'm going to bring out a taste of heaven to everyone that I come in contact with. And the question is that happening for us? When they meet us, are they thinking, wow, you're different? You're bringing out a taste of heaven. Because far too often we try to fit in, and you just can't. You can't say yes to Jesus, be in surrender, follow where Jesus goes, and fit in. You can't do it. You're different in a good way. Salt creates thirst for the things of God. Salt heals. Salt preserves. It preserves the ways and the teachings of Jesus. And so we actually have these baskets. They're on the back table with all the salt in it, because if maybe you weren't here the first couple episodes of this series and you didn't get one, or maybe you lost yours already, be sure to grab one, because what I'm hoping is that you can take this and put it somewhere that it's going to remind you of surrender, where it's going to remind you of this idea of a binge-worthy life. And all of the messages from this series are actually going to be up on our website. You can go to onelinechurch.org. There's a place you can click watch. All the messages are there. If you ever want to go back and rewatch them, or rewatch this message about what it means to give your life to building the kingdom, to something that's extraordinary. But I want you to take this piece of salt that will remind you of surrender. And that every time you see it, it will remind you of this prayer. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. But then there's a response to that. That when he actually does speak, and when he actually does call you, that you'll respond in obedience. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. And when you do that, he'll take what's ordinary and he'll do the extraordinary every single time. So I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray these words of Samuel. I'm going to pray it as a prayer for us and God. And I want to invite you to pray that to yourself. You don't have to pray it out loud, but to yourself. That in your heart, maybe for the first time ever, you're going to say, okay, I've got some doubts, Jesus, but I trust you. I trust that your way is better. Maybe it's for the 10th time or the 100th time. But we're going to pray together. We're going to surrender as a church together. And we're going to watch as our God takes what's ordinary and does the extraordinary. God, my prayer for all of us is simple, is that we would be surrendered to you. So God, a prayer for us to you this morning is speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. God, I pray that as we hear your voice, while sometimes it might feel like a still, small voice, that when we hear your voice, we'll respond in obedience. God, I pray for anything in our life that might be a stronghold for us right now, that you'll help us break free from that. God, I pray that in our lives we will feel your presence more than we've ever felt it before, that will be led by your Spirit. God, I pray if you're calling us into community or a deeper relationship with others, God, that we'll say yes to that. God, if there's any of us here that have a purpose in our life that we've yet to take hold of, maybe because of fear, maybe we fear that if we take that risk and it ends in failure, maybe that, God, everyone else will look around and think that we're crazy, whatever it is, God, that if we're missing out on your purpose for our life, God, that today will be a day where that changes. Because of our prayer of surrender, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Praise the name of your Son, Jesus.